Welcome back to the Papers Podcast, where you have your four hosts who review the world's health professions education literature and bring it to you on a weekly basis. Today, the crew is all assembled. It's Friday. We're recording. John's picture is particularly blurry, as are his arguments. Linda's hair is wet from the pool. Lara got all dressed up with a fancy shirt. Too bad you can't see the video. And I'm wearing my special hat for podcasts. It's Jason speaking, and I have with me Linda.
Hey there, everyone.
I have blurry John.
Hey, Jason. I'm glad I didn't get the memo about the hat because it's truly a hat for radio.
All right, Lava, you are up. You have picked a straightforward paper, I would say, for us today.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. And thank you, Jason, for teeing me up because, quite frankly, I picked this paper because it looks benign on the outside, but I got some ideas. I got some friskiness, some spicy awaits us. So I picked this paper today because quite frankly, I wanted an opportunity to chat with the three of you, three of my dear friends whom I trust in HPE, to have difficult conversations. Yeah, I'm buttering you up, Linda. I totally am. Are you nervous? Yeah. I picked this paper because I want to talk to you about the purposes of master's degrees in health professions education. These master's degrees are popping up everywhere, right? So in the paper we're going to see today, they talk about how in 1996, there were 7 master's in health professions education programs, and the most recent count puts it at 157. So I guess that's why this paper is entitled, and I quote, "The Rapid Growth and Expansion of Masters of Health Professions Education Programs, a Mixed Method Study of International Curricular Trends and Guidelines for Programs." Published in Medical Teacher, the authors are Tekian, Dekhtar, and Park. So my question to you, dear friends, dear colleagues, amigos, amigas of my heart, why have these programs exploded? Why do we need them so badly? Jason, Linda, John.
Oh, way to throw me out first. First of all,
Can I just say you complain every time somebody throws you under the bus first? At some point, it's going to have to happen. So you were saying, sorry, Jason, Linda,
I don't mind. That's fine. No, I'm happy to step up. Listen, I think it's a fantastic development. How big is the med ed world? There are millions and millions of health professionals. There are millions of trainees. They deserve great quality programs. Our healthcare system should be investing in training the workforce and the quality of that workforce. So we should have programs that develop leaders for those programs. So why is this happening? It's because there's a need.
I'm not convinced that is the need. I agree with you that is a need, but I also think that for people who do health professions education and don't do basic science research or aren't like awesome clinicians and that's all they do, or they're fantastic clinical teachers and that's all they do, for those who are clinician educators, until fairly recently, they don't get no respect. So I think some of it is to show that there's a sort of a professionalization of health professions education work. Now, the question comes, though, do you need a master's degree to do it? But I'm sure we'll get to that.
I can get in behind both of these arguments. I'll tell you that at my institution, McMaster, we developed a health professions education master with the argument as part of that development team to increase our bench strength, meaning locally we had a need for people that had advanced knowledge of the literature and of education theory to start filling in for a number of various roles. And so it was very much a educational administration need. We also have developed a fellowship as well. And Linda and I would say, have also kind of contributed to this in one way. We developed a national certification program for clinician educators through the Royal College. And so I think one version of the story is to address a need. Maybe there's an element of professionalization, but also recognizing that the U.S. election cycle is now alive, and there's conspiratorial vaccines in the water. A different version, if you were a student who just got your tuition bill, is that these programs are revenue generators for institutions. And so that's the conspiratorial version. And so let's not all pretend that the world is full of sunshines and butterflies.
So if you go to McMaster and you get a master's, what happens if you have a more advanced degree? Is it a MHPE? I'm just asking.
Well played, the Mick Master.
So
the Mick After Masters.
So here's my fear, and I mean it sincerely, because I fear what we're seeing and witnessing, and let's be really honest, the three of us are participating in degree creep, also known as educational inflation or credential inflation. It's the idea that employers are requiring more and more education or credentials for different jobs, and I'm sure you've seen it too as educators in these programs. I'm very proud to be the co-director of the research block in the Master's in HPE at the University of Pennsylvania. I love teaching in that program. We have people from all over the world. It's a hoot. But when I ask them why they're in the program, there really is a common refrain, and it's that they need a master's degree to advance to the next level. Like, sincerely, the line is, if they want to be program director, they need a master's. Go ahead, Jason.
I think there's a definition for credential creep. So let's parse that a little bit. Your example is a good one. So why do a degree with competencies over here for that job over there? That's credential creep. That doesn't make sense to me. So I like your example of a program director. Do you need to be a clinician educator, a master's of health professions education to be a PD or a clerkship director? And I would say no. I think that's a mismatch. But if we're making programs to make clinician educators, that seems like that makes sense.
If we're making them to make clinician educators. Yeah. So interesting, right? Because who's enrolling these programs? Clinician educators. But what are the things that we're teaching? And that we're going to cut this conversation here just for a minute, because we're going to get further down. But Linda, you need to say something. Go ahead. Frank.
Yeah. So the thing is, you've got, in our master's program, we've had residents who know that they're going to get one step up in whatever else they do if they have any master's degree.
Yeah. That's
and
true.
People who think they're going to be a good teacher if they do a master's degree. So there is a bit of a mismatch. And in our degree, we specifically said we're going to concentrate on research and education, because very few of the degrees do that. And that actually limits the focus to people who want to do that.
So I really appreciate those comments, sincerely, Jason and Linda, because I think that's one of the things I want us to keep an eye on as we go through this paper. And I just want to come back to what you said, John, about, the economic motive. I don't think that that's necessarily nefarious or a fake news item, because schools do make money from master's student tuition. And that's a thing. So there is a financial aspect to this. I also worry, though, that many of these programs, so Linda, I'm going to take yours out because I agree, you guys have a real research focus, and some of them do. But some of them have a research focus in the sense that a requirement is to participate in research. And so many of these students become free labor to pump out research papers that, as we've seen, as we see in the literature often, they're average. So are we supporting, inflating the literature? We're taking their students and their money, and I'm worried that students aren't necessarily better off. So let's keep an eye on that as we go through this paper. Now, just to cut somebody off out there, because somebody out there is saying right now, well, I'll go show Varpio. I'm going to go get some evidence of the difference that these degrees make. And that's fine. Yay, whoever you are. But I'm just going to put a question mark for us to come back to, a thought. If we're collecting evidence to prove that these master's degrees, these things should be in place, isn't that a little backwards? Shouldn't we first decide there's a need and then build the degree, right? So with that then said, I've entitled this episode Inspired by My T-shirt, which y'all can't see, but that's okay, because essentially the T-shirt says, and our episode title is, That's a Terrible Idea, Sign Me Up. And I mean it really literally, because I'm teaching one of these programs, so I'm a part of the problem here. But do you guys, before we go on to methods, yes, do you think there's a problem? Please, John, Linda, Jason.
I'm not worried about the problem. I just want to know is whether you're going to donate that to a listener, your T-shirt, because I'm going to write into the show if I get that T-shirt as swag.
Right. Yeah. Linda, do you think there's a problem?
Well, first of all, if you're going to donate it, please put it in the laundry first. Second,
well,
for several reasons. Most of these master's degrees mean taking a significant amount of time out of your usually busy clinical life. Could be some others, but usually busy clinical life. And maybe what most of these people need, when you look at needs, is a little bit less of a level than a master's degree, which implies some scholarly work. What they need is like fac dev on steroids or a diploma or a certificate, which they can do while they are continuing to do their quote unquote real work.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
I just want to reiterate what I was trying to push before, is that if any program is designed to meet a need to help somebody in their next stage of their career, then that is a good thing. That is virtuous. It doesn't have to be a master's. Sometimes it's a PhD because they want to be an educational scientist. Sometimes it's some other kind of program like the diploma that John and Linda started, which is more applied, or a faculty development program. Those are all good in our environment. It's where people feel pressured to do degrees that they'll never use. There were a whole bunch of people on my training program who did that because they just wanted to get in the door and get a job at the big hospital. And to my knowledge, they have never published an education paper. And so what a waste of their time, though they got the job.
So, but Jason, if they've never published, have they got a job doing something in education?
No.
Okay.
So let's get into this paper. It's an exploratory mixed method study aimed at developing an understanding in 5 areas. 1, how content is delivered across these MHPE programs. 2, the breadth of content taught therein. 3, the expected attributes of students graduating from the programs. 4, the context in which students learn. And 5, the future directions for improvement. So what did these people do in that mixed methods research? Well, these scholars, they did an environmental scan following the CHU approach. And as it should happen, just FYI, I'm doing an environmental scan at the moment. So I have some insights to this. I totally agree. I selected CHU too because, well, it's the best one out there. So, yep. So CHU's approach advocates for a passive and an active form of data collection. So for these authors, the first phase is passive, as is appropriate, and it's about collecting insights based on available data, available resources. They went to the websites of all 157, OMG, right, MHPE programs currently run around the world. And they sampled by geographic region, by the institutional form, so university versus hospital, public, private, those sorts of things. And then they added English language as a requirement to the website. Fine. So they came away with 46 websites to analyze. That was their corpus. And that helped them to answer the first research question, which I remind you, what content is delivered? Fine. They don't really go into how they analyze that data, but once you get deeper into the paper, you see it's basic descriptive stats. So that's fine. The second phase of CHU's environmental scan is active, and that entails going to get information from people about their perspectives, their experiential insights. And what that does is it adds nuance to the passive information. Great. In this study, they used focus groups with directors from those MHPE programs. Now, they had 3 focus groups with a total of 10 participants across all 3. Some of those were from the 46 represented schools in the passive cohort, and some they added from around the world outside of that cohort for a variety of reasons to enhance the participation. So they analyzed the transcripts of those focus groups by, and I quote, developing categories that summarize shared perspective based on their research aims 3, 4, and 5. The authors met to discuss the formation of categories with each aim, making iterative changes to convey more clearly the salient components of focus groups collectively and individually, end quote. Okay, so that's essentially the methods in a nutshell. John, Jason, Linda, what do you think?
I'm going to start with a shout out. How amazing is it that this group, for an internal purpose, which is a program evaluation of their own HPE program, says, let's start with an environmental scan, and then does, just the best high quality type of environmental scan as to what's happening so they can inform their own evaluation of their program. And so you can't see me, but I kind of want to stand up and do like a slow clap. It's pretty impressive. Overall, when you read this, the methods really make sense. They're explained well. The sequential exploratory model they use makes lots of sense. And we've used a similar one when we've tried to understand the landscape around a clinician educator model and the subsequent need for training. So I think I want to be very cautious about being too critical. My point of critique, though, is that when they self-identify as being an MMR study, so a mixed methods research study, there are some typical features that are not here in the methods section. And specifically, where is the joint display around how they align this sequential exploratory methods. And equally, we won't see, and I'll come back when we talk about the results, some of the challenges around missing a joint display there. And if you're not familiar with MMR, the idea is you need to make explicit how your data links so that it is able to ultimately integrate. And that'll be one of the challenges I'm going to foreshadow. Integration is so key with MMR. You don't want to simply say, hey, we have this type of data, it says this, we have this other type of data, say that. We have these two parallel silos, and they're not necessarily speaking to each other in the way that we integrate it at the end. And so I'm not suggesting that it's a major issue. I'll return to it later when we talk about results. But the absence of a joint display in both the methods and or the results suggests to me that it's under the surface there, but it's never been made explicit. And I think more and more as we see MMR starting to emerge in HPE, we're going to say those are one of our checkboxes. Those are one of our, if Varpio gets a checkbox for your paradigmatic positionality, then I'm going to say for MMR, I want to see the joint display so I understand how you're going to integrate.
Listen, I'm going to agree with everything John said. I also had the impression as a reader that this was a two-silo project as opposed to a true MMR that was integrated. I didn't get that out of the discussion. I do want to compliment the authors. I thought this was an elegant example of someone had a need internally and then made it scholarly, had a rigor to it, which was easily conveyed. And then the way they lay it out for the reader is actually really easy to follow and accessible. I'll come back and when we get to the discussion about what else they could have done.
Well, it's interesting. I do agree with what you've said, both of you, but I read through the methods section several times, and I'm not convinced I could actually do, without going further and reading Chew, et cetera, could actually do what they did. Having said that, I did actually go and read Chew because I didn't know all that much about environmental scanning. And actually, it's a recommendation that I could make. If you're ever going to do an environmental scan, there's a couple of really good tables talking about viewing or, data that's out there and then searching data that's out there and how you do it and what you target is. So I highly recommend Chew. So you can learn about undirected viewing, conditioned viewing, and searching, sort of passive and active, as Lara said. One quick question. They're restricted to English language programs.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether, given that this is around the world, yes, I know they went further in the focus groups, which were very small. In an era of Google Translate and similar things, is it reasonable to do this when you can easily throw something into an online translator?
John, what do you think?
I think it's fine. If we're going to criticize them, I get the criticism, but it's a feasibility operational issue. And not once have I ever in any of my synthesis ever said, I'm going to restrict beyond English and felt a tang of, I felt the guilt of there's probably great literature I'm not getting. But it's really hard. Google Translate is one thing, but the feasibility of doing that, I can't imagine how to do focus groups. They were very intentional at sampling from all kind of major segments of the globe. You know what? I think it's picking at the edges, the English restriction.
Can I just add one other quick question maybe Lara knows the answer to? I couldn't find where that original list of 157 came from. There's a line that says...
Read the line, Jason.
The line says the first author assembled the list.
Yeah.
It is what it is. So where'd that come from? Maybe there's 400.
There are certainly some that are missing. There is a meeting at one of our international meetings of program directors. And many people don't go because they don't know about it. They don't get their program on the list. My program has never been on their list, as far as I know. It's hard to find, I guess, for them.
So this is actually something I happen to know Lara, and he's kindly shared with me the list because I too have tried to find a comprehensive list of all the med-ed master's programs available. And quite frankly, it's by, I think, the sheer determination that man has to keep compiling these things and adding names as he hears about them, because there is no repository that I'm aware of. I haven't been able to find it. Yes.
That's what Google's for, though. It would have been nice to have a little bit more than those 4 words from the author.
The other thing I just want to come back to about the English language point. I'm going to agree both with John and with Linda, because John, I think there is a feasibility issue, but Linda, I agree with you too. And actually, I think that's going to come back as we take a look at the results. So let's just put a pin in that and we'll come back to it. So I'm going to share the results according to the 5 questions, because that's how the authors present it in the findings. So question 1, remember, how is content delivered? Well, 39% of these programs are online only. 41% are hybrid, online and in person. Fine. Question 2, the breadth of content taught in the programs. Well, seems to me there are core courses and there are electives, and they cover a broad range of concepts, everything from scholarship and leadership to health system sciences, pedagogy, teaching. So a wide variety. Question 3, the expected attributes of students graduating from these programs. Well, they list 2 main expectations. First, students were expected to be leaders and change agents in their local institution. Second, now, and it's interesting because now you start to get by population. And remember, it's only 10 participants, so, take it for what it is. The North American and European participants specifically also added the desire to see their students' mindsets change, often referencing a growth-oriented behavior or mindset. Okay. Question 4, the context in which students learn. Well, participants described individualized learning opportunities that allowed students to subspecialize to meet the demands of their unique environments, ideally connecting theory with practice. But I think that's really important. Again, we're going to come back to that. Subspecialized to meet the demands of their unique environments. So very individualized. Question 5, the future directions for improvements. 2 points here. And the first one's kind of interesting because participants from Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia talked about the difference in their local contexts and how those differences required that the programs teach different topics. For instance, assessment. They have to teach it in different ways that actually fit the needs of the local institution, because assessment means different in different places. Then the paper states that the participants from Africa and South Asia also described wanting more regulations and standards to be put in place for who can teach in these master's programs. Okay. So the program should be individually localized, but maybe the programs should be more standardized. So I know it starts to get a little tricky there. The second point about future directions for improvement is about building an MHPE community. The North American participants talked about forming a consortium to share best practices and to provide opportunities for faculty to share their expertise with institutions lacking subject knowledge or resources. One participant said, and I quote, "I would love to see more and more sharing of faculty." The South Asian and African participants discussed formal relationships between different medical education organizations in their country would be useful. Dying to know what you think. I have a couple of ideas. Let's go, Linda, John, Jason.
I have a couple of comments. One relates to, and I'm going to use the word very broadly, but the validity of the data. 40 odd programs out of 150 odd. That's like 25%. 10 people in 3 focus groups out of all those programs. That's pretty small. So I'm not sure if I can really, I guess it's trustworthy, if I can trust these data. Let's assume I can. I think they've actually missed a couple of things. For instance, the context in what they learned. I think you mentioned that there are places in the world where you have to have some sort of, I'm going to say certification. I don't mean a certificate necessarily, but some sort of recognition of your education skills before you're allowed to do things like supervise, for instance. And that may push some of these things in one direction versus another. The other thing is, I was surprised that health system science was one of the big chunks of things that many of the programs had people learn. And I can understand that there's clearly a link between health systems and health professions education. But I'm wondering, do we really need something on healthcare delivery or health policy and economics or value in healthcare in an MHPE program?
if you look, there's very few programs that said they were core, that was core. And I bet you a lot of them are from the US. That's my guess. And my rationale is that healthcare is just such a huge topic, healthcare organization in the US. It's less so around the
world. Two things. I want to come back to that thing that you were redlining second. But first, it was telling to me that the first finding from the North and the South, minus the Europeans, was that the outcome they really wanted was educational leaders or change agents. And so what I take from this is I wonder if this graduate degree is passing people by in terms of the intentionality. Back in the dark ages when I was doing my master's, it was looked as a classical graduate degree with a research component where you would contribute to the literature and advance the literature. We've had discussions with our own local program, mostly of which people have ignored my thought, which is we're not producing education scholars from that program. And if we're talking about grade inflation, if you really want to get into education research, it's probably the era now that you need a PhD to be successful in that. And so we might have a fit for purpose malalignment, which is if we want to produce leaders, then maybe we need professional programs. They can be at the graduate level, a professional kind of designation, or a certification level if it's more applied. But imagining that one size fits all to produce leaders, but we're also going to have an emphasis on producing scholars, it's not working. It's probably insufficient as scholar, and it's probably redundant or time wasted in terms of producing education leaders. The Europeans, they had a different opinion on all this, so I'll let them be. The second part speaks to this explosion of 150 plus, and where the global South is saying, where is there issues of access, equitability, and can there not be opportunities for collaboration? To which I say, yes. Recognizing that most of these programs, or the vast majority of these programs, are an online or hybrid model, there is an opportunity for scale. Now, you want scale in the sense of still making it rich for the instructional milieu for the students, so that it's not 300 people on Zoom, which would be death by 1,000 cuts for me if I was a student in one of these programs. But reduplication for a common shared desire that I think the whole HPE community would be to improve the quality of the distribution of our educational programs. I do wonder whether there can be more intentionality. We do see partnerships from organizations around accreditation. Linda and I built a curriculum that was open access to any program that wanted to use it, so that there didn't need to be a lot of local reduplication, but a lot of freedom and flexibility for creativity. But again, it comes back to my conspiratorial theory, which is if I'm trying to make cash, then I don't want to share the secret sauce, and I don't want to dilute my brand by saying, hey, you can have the big fancy Ivy League school of the North degree, but we're not going to share those profile and credentials with another program in the global South. So we're back at that conflict that I might have foreshadowed at the start.
I agree with all these comments. I think they're relevant and they resonate with me. First of all, I want to comment that the kind of curriculum that people found, the sort of core themes, those are no surprise. I think they are the major content areas. It strikes me that collaborations between programs would benefit learners and help those who have very low resource programs to perhaps mount even better quality. But I take John's point that there's a bit of friendly competition between all these programs for students and tuition. In the last year, my department started a new MedEd fellowship, and we offered to another institution to collaborate on our MedEd fellowships and share faculty. And we would each be teaching all of our learners, and they declined because we wouldn't pay them tuition as well as offer professors. So I get it. Picking up on John's thread, about the mismatch, for me, that really speaks to the execution of these programs. The statements that we hear from all of these kind of grad programs that says we make giants, that's just too non-precise. It just says we make great people, we help careers. I think what we need in this conversation, and maybe what's missing from this paper, is some precision. What exactly is the competence profile and the career path of your graduates? What's your intent with that? And how does that match the curriculum you're making? And how is it executed? Because even with the intent and the career aligned, that doesn't mean it's executed well. And so the whole how much research versus how much leadership dichotomy is wrapped up in that.
So what I want to do here is sort of bring all of those threads together, because there's a lot of them that I agree with. Because when you look at this data set and you sort of reverse engineer an answer for why do these programs exist, well, it looks based on the information provided, they exist to create growth-minded change leaders, but for a local context. So if you want change leaders, then would a business degree, an MBA, a master's in business administration, would that be more useful? The content taught seems to cover a lot of educational topics, but that isn't necessarily what's expected of graduates when they leave. So I'm a bit concerned that there is a misalignment between the needs expressed for these programs and the goals the programs are expected to meet or hoping to meet. And I also really want to draw a concern about, or underscore, John, I can't remember the phrase you used. It was double click or something. And I'm still sort of circling back to that. My brain is...
Red line, double click.
Yeah, all of them irritate
team, all of them.
All of them irritate me. So I'm just trying to forget them. But anyway.
And yet you're trying to expropriate them from me.
Right.
So,
Merry Christmas.
Right, so,
this is what I bring. I'm really concerned about the line. There's a line in the conclusion that I'm really worried about. And that line states, and I'll read it for you. Future research should explore the standards of educational process to provide consensus or guidelines regarding content that must be taught within MHPE programs, end of quote. I'm going to push back against that, because what I actually think is that we need diversity across these programs. Somebody needs a leadership program, let Institution A take that push. They need research programs. If it's quantitative, go to Institution B. Qualitative, go to Institution C. If you need a program that really focuses on supporting clinician educators to be excellent educators, let them go to Institution D. And of course, like those, A, B, C, and D are like great big groups. But one of the things this data says is that we need to be responsive to the local needs. And I'm going to push back and then say, so then don't try to standardize. Yeah. Because local needs need to drive, then stop standardizing.
Lara, but isn't the standardization that they're talking about maybe clarifying, if you choose this content area that, this is the standard, this is the level or depth for it, as opposed to everybody has to do the same thing? I'm not sure homogenization is the same as standardization. It's
really unclear in the discussion as far as I read it. So I'd be interested in what you guys think. But in my mind, when I read that, it sounds like homogenization, like standardization across. The other part that makes me think that way is this, and that's the last point I want to make, is about sharing faculty. Sharing faculty is hard if we focus on local needs, because what is needed in your space may not be what's needed in my space. And worse than that, what you need may not be something I can deliver, even if that's like the way you need it may not be the way that as a faculty member from a different space is able to support. And I think also another piece of that we're not taking into consideration is that generally faculty don't get promoted for teaching. So teaching is actually part of their service requirements, and promotion is not based on how many students you teach, but on a whole other set of criteria. John, and then Linda.
I think that's really thoughtful. The one piece I would say, though, that if I was an under-resourced program and I could build a collaboration together with adequately, I was going to say over-resourced, but I haven't met a medical school that's over-resourced at this point, at least not in my section of the woods. But if I could collaborate with them and say, okay, you don't have the contextual knowledge, but we don't have all the resources to deliver something that's going to meet our knowledge. Yeah. So let's build something in together and do that. I also appreciate that people who are getting credit for promotion and tenure or for their actual requirement of employment might not have the capacity to take on this additional thing. So let's not fill up the backpack of do more stuff for other people. But I would say that in all of us are reflected in this in terms of our travel and the way we donate our own abilities. We are investing in programs around the world and helping with them. And I get a tremendous amount of pleasure if I can do it in a way that doesn't say, hey, I'm the external expert, let me tell you how to do it, but more, let me listen, understand what you need. I'm really grateful for this opportunity because it's kind of exciting to see your program doing something really interesting and unique. Here's my perspectives. Take them as are helpful. It's all with the tenor and the approach and the
Sure, Linda.
And what are the motivators and drivers?
I must be waving my hands or something because I'm not
to that.
doing anything. It just goes on mute. Anyway, all right. So a couple of things. When I read the standard sentence that you read earlier, I think that they're trying to aim for something like an accreditation of programs. And I believe there is an accreditation of HPE programs in Europe. I'm not 100% convinced, but I think there may be. The challenge with anything like that is, as we've talked about, you're taking one context and putting it in another, and it may not work if things are very specific. I'd also like to point out that I agree with you that people don't get promoted on the basis of teaching alone. One of my past deans said, well, researchers get promoted because they have world recognition for their research through publications, etc. So if you're a teacher who has international recognition of your teaching, we'll take that for promotions. Just a thought.
Wouldn't it be great? So I'm just going to end with I'm going to take the option of having the last word and say, if quite frankly, if we're going to support these kinds of programs, then I'm going to advocate really strongly that local institutions do some due diligence responsibility things, like figuring out what your community needs, align your program for that. If you want to do international collaboration, huge fan of that, but then don't put that burden on faculty members who are chasing tenure, who are chasing promotion. Let's make that the problem of the senior clinician who already has it, or the senior faculty member who already has full tenure or full promotion, because they have different choices available to them. The last thing I think anybody would want to see is a master's program where we're sharing resources in the best spirit possible and finding that our faculty are junior faculty and bearing the brunt of a load they are just dying under. So let's be really right? So let's be desperately responsible.
Can I get an amen?
Let's not think that all of these things need to look the same, because then we start to, then we have to be really careful about whose right is going to be international right way of doing. And none of us want to get behind that. And so with that final word, I am going to open it up for our ever dubious round of voting. We're going to start with methods. We're going to go hillbilly hat, then Linda, then John.
Okay, for the audience, that's me. I'm wearing my hillbilly hat today. Today's United Nations Hillbilly Hat Day. What am I going to say? This is for methods. I actually think this is very rigorous. I wish they would have gone wider in terms of, where'd this list come from? Because I suspect there's probably 500 of these, or 1,000, not the number they came up with out of the air. So I'm going to give it a 4.
Same reasons. I'm going to give it a 4.
I'm going to give it a 3, just barely. And the reason is, I think they do lots of great work. I think it makes lots of sense and it holds together, but they signal right at the start that we're doing MMR. And they don't have the integration piece. They do sequential exploratory, and then they report their data sequentially. And they don't integrate one to the other. And if they publish this outside of a HPE journal and publish it in an MMR journal, I bet you there would be a big pushback from the DE to say, no, not acceptable. We need to see how you integrate. And at a minimum, we need to see a joint display for your results where you put your data visually typically and show how one leads to the other. And then in your results or your discussion, you bring it together and say, this informs that. An example would be, all right, we see all this emphasis on curriculum and evaluation and assessment and research in your curriculum design, but all your people are talking about leadership development. Why is there this disconnect? And that unpacks and finds the meta inferences for this result. And because they don't do that, I think as an MMR study, it's got a potential major issue, not a fatal flaw. They just missed a step. It's like it's incomplete.
So for those precise reasons, because I think it's a very good environmental scan, and I think it has problems as a mixed method study, I'm going to give it a 3.5. Now, moving on, we're then going to go to...
Did you just say precise and then give like decimals? And
precisely 3.5. Like that's more precise than a 3 or
it's
a 4.
Very positivist of you.
I have a very positive disposition. Thank you. All right, moving on. We are going to talk about educational impact, going in the inverse order. John, Linda, Jason.
I give this paper a 4. I don't need to know what the world is doing much more so that it can inform what we're doing. Understanding, of course, my context is going to always be unique to kind of a generalization of what the world is doing. But I think this question about what's the state of the art in 2023 is, I think it's pretty well established. There's some challenges, of course, but this is educational impact. If you are a program developer, if you are an educational administrator for an HPE program, I think this is the current state of the art.
Linda.
I'm going to give this a 3. Basically because I didn't learn much new. And I've, over time with John, developed a diploma program, I developed a certificate program and a master's program. And yeah, I use some of the curricular content that's here. Had some of the same ideas when I put it forward for approval. So it's nice, but it's not very new. So 3 for me.
Jason.
Also a 3. Similar reasons. But now, because I read this, I'm going to go start a master's program just to add to the list.
And so I'm going to give this a 4, a 3, and a 2. I'm going to give it a 4 if you're Jason, you're about to build a brand new master's program, you want to know what people are doing. I'm going to give it a 2 if you're a junior faculty member, you're reading this, you're having heart palpitations, I hear your pain. So, but I'm also going to give it a 3 because as somebody who wants to teach environmental scans, this is, a really good paper
that's a good point.
For showing what an environmental scan can do and why we have to be careful about calling environmental scans mixed methods research, a little different. And so with that, John, I know you love me more for the fact that I gave it 3 scores.
Well, it's average of 3, so that's perfect.
So you have multiple universes?
Yeah, I do.
We have different scores. I want a multiple universe where we don't have to have multiple scores and you just have one number. It's the whole point of the aggregation. You're aggravating me with your lack of aggregation.
Is the Lara multiple universe the Laraverse? Because that has a lot of potential.
It has tons of potential. So friends, come join us in the Laraverse. And in order to do that, you can find us on the internets at Papers Podcast. John, no.
Oh, just praying that you're going to get the call signs right.
Oh,
far, no, but keep it up.
So far, yes. On the website, it's Papers Podcast. On the email, it's thepaperspodcast@gmail.com.
Wow.
This is the Laraverse. This is how we rock the universe. And with that, friends, I will say, talk to you later.
No, bye is mine. It's bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Please get me out of this universe.
Take care, everybody. You've been listening to the Papers Podcast. We hope we made you just slightly smarter. The podcast is a production of the Unit for Teaching and Learning at the Karolinska Institutet. The executive producer today was my friend Teresa Sörö. The technical producer today was Samuel Lundberg. You can learn more about the Papers Podcast and contact us at www.thepaperspodcast.com. Thank you for listening, everybody, and thank you for all you do. Take care. I was going to say, and 3 smart people review the literature for you.
And then there's you.
The question is who? Yeah.
I also want to point out that we haven't agreed on a standardized tagline.
We don't need a standardized tagline.
All right. Okay.